Welcome back. Do you remember a couple of years ago when we all lost our minds over the price of eggs? When making an omelet for breakfast felt like a display of financial dominance? Well, I have some news for you. Hold my beer. Because what is coming next might make us look back on those prices with a nostalgic smile. We are standing on the threshold of the most massive economic experiment of the last 100 years. The new U.S. administration is pressing a big red button labeled tariffs. The promise is simple. We will tax foreign goods, protect American manufacturers, and live happily ever after. It sounds great, doesn't it? It fits perfectly on a bumper sticker. But there's a small problem. The economy isn't a sticker. It is a complex, tangled web. And if you pull a string in Beijing or Mexico City, the wallet shakes for a guy in Oklahoma, a student in London, and a family in Tokyo. Today, we are not talking about high-level politics. Forget the diplomatic letters. Today, we are talking about your pocket. Why could your next iPhone cost as much as a used car? Why will sneakers become an investment asset? And what does the phrase trade war actually mean for a normal person who just wants to buy a new laptop and drink a cup of coffee? Sit back. We're about to count your money. First, let's figure out exactly what has been proposed. No complex jargon. The plan currently on the table in the White House looks something like this. Point 1. Introduce a universal tariff of 10%, or maybe even 20%, on absolutely everything imported into the U.S. from any country in the world. It doesn't matter if it's French wine, a Korean television, or a German car. Point 2, a special dish for China, a tariff of 60%. So what, you might say? Let China pay, let Apple pay. What does that have to do with me? And here lies the main lie that politicians tell you. Tariffs are not paid by China. The Chinese government does not send a check to Washington. The tariff is paid by the importer. That means the company that brings the goods in. Now, guess what a company does when its expenses suddenly jump by 60%? Option A, they nobly decide to make less money and cry in the corner. Option B, they rewrite the price tag in the store, passing every single cent on to you. Spoiler alert, it is always option B. Let's look at a concrete example. Let's take the holy grail of tech, the iPhone. You have probably seen the inscription, designed in California, assembled in China. This means the brain of the phone was dreamed up in the US, but the hands that put it together are in China. Right now, a standard new iPhone Pro costs about $999 in the US. If a 60% tariff on Chinese imports is introduced, the math becomes brutal. Analysts have already crunched the numbers. The price could jump by $300 to $400 minimum. This isn't just inflation. This is a shock. Your $1,000 phone turns into a $1,500 phone. But Apple will move production, the optimists scream. Sure, they are already trying. To India, to Vietnam. But do you know how long it takes to build a factory, hire and train 100,000 people, and set up supply chains for microchips? Years. The tariffs start tomorrow. And this doesn't just apply to phones, laptops, gaming consoles, headphones, smart kettles. 90% of the electronics in your home passed through Chinese assembly lines in one way or another. Remember the shortage of video cards during the crypto mining boom? Imagine that, again, only now the shortage is created artificially, by price. Gaming is once again becoming a hobby for the elite. Okay, you say, I'll just stick with my old phone for another year. Fine, but what are you going to wear? The clothing and footwear industry is the second victim. Fast fashion? Nike sneakers, Levi's jeans, a huge chunk of this is sewn in Asia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, China. A universal tariff of 10-20% hits everything. The National Retail Federation has already released a report. They are screaming in panic. Consumers will lose between $46 and $78 billion in spending power a year. Simply put, a pair of running shoes that cost $90 will cost $120. A t-shirt for $20 becomes $30. Now, let's go to the kitchen. Mexico, our favorite supplier of avocados, tomatoes, and berries in the winter. The tariffs apply to them too. If the U.S. starts a trade war with its neighbors, your guacamole becomes a delicacy, coffee, chocolate, bananas. All of this is imported. And consider your car. Modern vehicles rely on thousands of chips and parts that cross the Mexican border multiple times during assembly. If those parts get taxed, we aren't just talking about higher sticker prices, we're talking about empty dealership lots and waiting months just to buy a simple sedan. You won't notice it immediately. At first it will be, that's weird, the grocery receipt is $10 higher even though I bought the exact same things. Then it will be $20, then $50. This is called cost push inflation. And the scariest part is that the Federal Reserve cannot fight it. Usually when prices rise, they raise interest rates to cool down the economy. But here, prices are rising not because people have too much money, but because the government introduced a tax. If you raise rates, you kill business. If you don't raise them, prices fly into space. It's a catch-22. I see the comments, but I don't live in America. I don't care. Oh, if only it were that simple. The US economy is the engine of the global financial system. When the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. Here's what will happen globally. First, the dollar will go crazy. If the US closes itself off with tariffs, imports fall. Demand for the dollar inside the country might rise, but global trade will start looking for alternatives. This creates wild volatility in currency exchange rates. Your local currency rate against the dollar will start jumping like a frightened rabbit. Second, China will retaliate. Do you think Beijing will just stay silent? No. China has a nuclear button in the economy, rare earth minerals. We talked about them in the video about Greenland, remember? They are needed for everything, from electric car batteries to the screens of those very iPhones. If China cuts off the export of these metals in response, factories will stop not just in the US, but in Europe and Asia too. The shortage becomes global. Third, trade diversion. If Chinese goods are locked out of the US, where do they go? That's right, to other markets. To Europe, to Asia, to Latin America. Markets will be flooded with cheap goods. Local manufacturers in your countries will howl and demand, guess what? Their own tariffs. The world will start to close up. Globalization, which has made goods cheap for the last 30 years, is starting to die. To be objective, let's give the floor to the supporters of tariffs. What is their logic? They say, yes, it will hurt, but it's like chemotherapy. We need to get rid of the addiction. The logic is this. If an iPhone costs $2,000, Apple will be forced to build a factory in Texas or Detroit. And then an American worker named John will get a job, get a paycheck, and pay taxes in America. It sounds patriotic. But economists, those boring people with calculators, say the math doesn't add up. For every one job saved in the steel industry by tariffs, we lose about 16 jobs in other industries because raw materials became more expensive. If steel gets expensive, Ford has to raise car prices. People buy fewer cars. Ford fires workers. The circle closes. So, what should we prepare for? The trade war of 2025 is not about tanks and missiles. It is about price tags and logistics. It is a war of attrition where the main casualty will be the final consumer. We are entering the era of the expensive world. Cheap tech, cheap clothes, and cheap shipping are artifacts of a bygone era. My advice? If you were planning to update your laptop, buy a car, or change your phone, perhaps now is the best time. This isn't financial advice, but common sense suggests electronics are unlikely to be cheaper than they are today for the next couple of years. The US is trying to rewrite the rules of the game. China is not going to surrender. And you and I are sitting in the front row of this fascinating show with a bucket of popcorn, which, by the way, will also get more expensive soon because the packaging is made from imported cardboard. Thanks for watching. If you like it when complex economic disasters are explained in simple language, hit that like button and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, are you ready to pay 30% more for a phone if it says made in your country on the back? Or is your wallet more important than patriotism? See you in the next one. Protect your money.